Hello, mundane astrology fans. Bill Meridian speaking to you on October 23rd, 2025. I'm sitting in New Jersey, and of course, we have a race for the governor's seat going on right now that will be resolved when we vote on November 3rd. I do not have exact birth times for either candidate, have been unable to find them. So we have to go with charts set for 6 a.m. So the all important midheaven, natal and directed, cannot be employed for either candidate. So we'll work with what we have. And I have my old website, billmeridian.com, and a new additional website, billmeridianastrology.com, in case you're interested. So first we have Jack Citarelli, who was born December 12, 1961 in Somerville, New Jersey, not far from where I am right now. I've set it for 6 a.m. You take a brief look at his chart and note Mercury, Sun, Mars, and Sagittarius, Venus. Very good for promoting yourself, I think, and getting the word out there and being enterprising. And if you've seen him on television, this is what he radiates. He radiates Jupiter. He radiates Sagittarius. And in the debate between he and the other candidate, he was just big smile on his face, just Jupiterian, kept coming out with facts, figures. He was just on Fox Business News an hour ago, whereas the other candidate looked quite flustered, didn't know what to do with a barrage of facts. So we won't spend much time on the natal chart because we want to get right to the prospects for the election. September 21, 2025, we had a solar eclipse that was conjunct his Apollon, which is a Uranian planet, which doesn't mean very much unless it connects to inner planets, of course, because everybody born at that time will have this eclipse on their Apollon because it moves so slowly. But it did equal Mercury Cupido and Saturn Chiron. Apollon takes things and spreads them out. Like if you took an aerosol can of fragrance and you sprayed it, that dispersion, that expansion is great. And if you're a writer, you want Mercury Apollon because you want many people, Apollon, to read your books, Mercury. So this is Mercury Cupido. Cupido is organizations and groups. So as far as I can see, Citarelli really appeals to groups. And in fact, they just had an Hispanic leader in one town here in New Jersey saying they're all for him. They have the same beliefs. They don't like the Democratic rule of the last 8 years. And Saturn Chiron, I don't know quite how to read, but Chiron, as my old friend Debbie Kempton Smith used to say, is a maverick. So compared to recent governance, he is a maverick. He wants to go back to constitutional government, lower taxes, etc. And he's got a solid plan. He's got all the facts and figures. So the eclipses, by the way, start in effect about 3 months in advance and about 9 months to a year afterwards, although I've certainly seen exceptions to those cases. On October 22, Jupiter's contraparallel Venus. October 24, or right in this time period, his Uranus is 90 to Uranus, which of course happens to everybody in that age range. But it also equals Chronos Poseidon. So Chronos is being high up, it's being expert, it's being very, very elevated. It's the guru on top of the mountain. Wherever you find Chronos, you find excellence, because Chronos is the area of the horoscope where you are least fettered by negative feelings, thoughts, and emotions. And Poseidon is enlightenment. Poseidon was very strong in the horoscope of Thomas Edison, who invented the light bulb and brought us, well, it was actually, he brought us electricity, but it actually was Nikola Tesla who brought us alternating current. But anyway, Chronos Poseidon equals the sun in the horoscope of my Zen master. So I think Chronos Poseidon means it's a sudden flash of wisdom from on high. So to ground this in contemporary terms, he's going back to constitutional government and the type of government that made the state of New Jersey grow, rather than overtaxing it and hiring too many people at the governmental level. So I think that is very much a positive. Election week, transiting Jupiter-Uranus midpoint is 45 degrees to his Pluto, and it equals Apollon, it equals Venus Poseidon, and it equals Neptune. I can say that that's just great for communicating with lots of people and making them feel very comfortable. And let's remember, it was candidate Barack Obama who had a progressed sun right on his Apollon when he was campaigning in the first election. And he said, when you get into the ballot box, uh, beams of particles or rays of sunlight will hit you, and you'll know what to do. That was an Apollonian statement if I ever heard one, and obviously it succeeded. So I think it will succeed for Chitterelli too. And on November 11th, which is after the election, but of course it's somewhat in effect, and on the election on November 3rd, stationary retrograde Jupiter 45 to Pluto, which we read as Jupiter equals Pluto on a 90-degree dial. That is great for big power, big money. Now let's jump to Democratic opponent Mikey Sherrill. Born January 19th, 1972, 6 a.m., Alexandria, Virginia, and Sun in Capricorn, Mercury in Capricorn, Mars 15 Aries. We can just a brief look around the chart. And she's got Saturn at 29 Taurus, which will be clobbered, of course, but in February, which is beyond the election period, by the eclipse at 28 Aquarius, which is in hard aspect to Saturn. So it will be eclipse square Uranus hitting her Saturn off in the distance. So let us look at her prospects. Now, here's where the trouble starts right here. Stationary retrograde Uranus on September 6th was 45 degrees to Mars, conjunct Saturn, 135 to Uranus, and 90 to Venus. In other words, natally, she has the planetary picture Saturn equals Mercury, Uranus equals Mars. I don't know her. I don't know anything about her, but it looks like she has a low tolerance for frustration and can easily blow up verbally. Mercury, Uranus equals Mars, with Saturn sitting in that natal picture, means she's suppressing a lot of verbal energy and anger. And I also want to say Uranus conjunct stationary, well, you're transiting Uranus going over Saturn is difficult as difficult can be. Right now, I have Saturn squaring my Uranus in the sixth house, and everything breaks. That's when you set up a structure, you want it to run right. Uranus Saturn upsets that, and you find your cell phone doesn't work, your internet doesn't work, your car needs servicing, and you have to. It gets incredibly frustrating. It's very hard to launch anything new under Uranus Saturn. And during my career as an astrologer, I have always asked businessmen, when was the most difficult time in your career? And it was always Uranus Saturn in effect at that time. September 21, the solar eclipse was on her Pluto, 90 degrees to Jupiter. It equaled the Sun Saturn and the Jupiter Pluto midpoints. October 3rd, Uranus is conjunct progressed Saturn. Then during this whole period, progressed Sun is on the Mars Saturn midpoint. October 28th, Uranus 45 degrees to Mars equals Saturn. That, I think, will set her off. That's in a few days. She may spurt out something that she regrets very much later on. November 14th, which again, it's beyond the November 3rd election, but Uranus is conjunct Saturn equals Mars, Mercury, Saturn again. So with Uranus sitting in here, activating that picture, that's enough to tilt this in her opponent's favor. But I also wanted to point out something else here, which I think you'll find of interest. That is solar eclipse is 0 to Pluto. Do you remember Lehman Brothers, which is now at the bottom of the ocean with the Titanic? You remember they went broke in 07, 08. This is the same configuration, eclipse conjunct Pluto, that hit the horoscope of Richard Fuld, who ran Lehman Brothers, ran it right out of business. It can throw you way up or throw you way down. It depends. And being on the Sun Saturn midpoint, Jupiter Pluto is okay, but that's on a 90-degree dial, and Sun Saturn is not okay because Pluto is big money, big power, labor unions, and Pluto is just things getting out of control. As I say, Pluto in a negative way can be a snowball that starts at the top of a hill, and as it rolls downhill, it gathers mass and momentum and becomes an avalanche. And so this is what happened to Lehman Brothers, which was heavily, heavily leveraged under the direction of Fold. And suddenly when the markets pulled back, now the market's pulling back, or the Pluto, that's out of your control. So she's already had a couple missteps if you've been following what's been going on. And she is under the spotlight because she is on a Senate Armed Service Committee, and she's made $7 million trading defense stocks. And also, she's only showed up for half of the votes in government. In other words, she's not there half the time. And also, there's a bit of a scandal, which is hard to understand, about her graduating the Naval Academy. Apparently, had to walk behind everybody else as a disciplinary measure, but we don't really know why. So Jack C's chart is better aspected, so he is the likely winner. Again, I'd rather have exact birth times. I've been unable to find them, but this is a heavily Democratic state. My father, in fact, was a Democratic politician here in the 60s. So that is my projection based upon the information that I have. And as always, a mundane book, Mastering Geopolitical Prediction. And then there is the old Predictive Power of Eclipse Paths. And then there's InSearch 1 and InSearch 2, the old Charles Jane magazines, which I call the Scholars Series. You can buy them at BillMeridian.com, or you can go to BillMeridianAstrology.com. And I think we've got the payment system straightened out. We had to have our differences with PayPal, and then had differences with GoDaddy Payment, and we are now on what I think is reliable, Square. So this you can all buy at BillMeridian.com. Thank you very much for listening. I'll be back again soon with an update on the economy from my old book, Planetary Economic Forecasting. Bye-bye for now.